Okay, welcome. Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the Abridged Code of Jewish Law, Chapter 46. Chapter 46, and we're up to base number 2. So we're talking about the halachas of different food, or foods that we can't eat. And we mentioned that number 1, we mentioned that the blood in an egg, we can't eat the blood that's in an egg, blood spots. But base number 2, dam dogim mutter. Fish blood is permitted. So on a simple level, we don't need to salt the fish like we salt the meat, but it goes even further than this. Ach im kipsu b'kli, but if the blood was gathered, was collected in some type of utensil, let's say a glass. So you had a nice glass of delicious fish blood. So technically you could eat it, you could drink it. Problem is, it's also mipnei maras ayin. You can't have it because of maras ayin. Maras ayin means it looks like you're doing the wrong thing. Right? There's two aspects to maras ayin. Maras ayin, you know, let's say, for example, let's say a person went into McDonald's and bought a Coke. Okay. Now, it could be there's also a real crashes problem because it could be things splash onto the spouts of where they serve the Coke. But in theory, let's just presume. So he walks out of McDonald's with a Coke in a McDonald's cup, God forbid. So even though he only had Coke, but it looks like he went there and had God forbid, whatever he had there. So Maras Ayin can have one or both of the following effects. Either a person who doesn't know better will go by and go, "Oh, I didn't know McDonald's is kosher, but look at that religious person. He's eating there, so must be I can too." And he just got a Coke, but the other person is going to go and have a cheeseburger, Sasashon. Or someone will say, "Oh, look at that hypocrite. Pretends to be from, and look what he's doing." And then they can lose respect for Torah, and they'll become the Yetzer Hara's excuse not to keep anything.
Rabbi,
So same as yeah.
the English translation here has a good translation for Maras Ayin. It says, lest it create a wrong impression.
Right. Okay. It gives the wrong impression. It gives the appearance of something wrong being done. So if you have a glass of fish blood, even though technically you could drink it, but it could look like a glass of regular blood, of animal blood. So lefichach, therefore, im nikashu medogim, if it's clear, it's obviously clear that it's fish. Kagoin sheyesh bo kaskasim, for example, there's scales in this glass of fish blood. Mutter then is permissible. So the bottom line is, if you want to enjoy a nice, refreshing glass of fish blood, put some scales in it to make it even more appetizing. I can't say I'm tempted.
Is it red? Is it red?
I guess it's reddish, yeah. Okay. Now, similarly, since we're talking about we can't have blood, so Gimel, number 3. So those who just joined us, chapter 46, number 3. Im noshach kikar gadom, if you bit into a loaf of bread and the like. And v'yotze dom mishinov al gabe kikar, and you have blood from your teeth, or really from your gums, on the bread. Sarach lachtoich mokem adam lazarka, you have to throw away the part of the food that has the blood on it. So if sometimes bite into food, and there can be a little blood stain on the food, either from the gums. It can also be if a person had a cut on the lip or something, they bit their tongue or something. Sometimes you bite your gums or your cheek, the inside of your cheek, and there can be blood on the food. So you have to cut that piece off before you eat it. So that's because it came out of your body. Avol adam shebein hashanayim. If there's blood literally from between the teeth, but it means it's still inside your mouth. So sometimes there can be a little bit of blood from your gums or your teeth. Moitze b'chol kevin shelo perish. So during the weekday, a person can just could suck on it and swallow it because it didn't leave his body. V'lo b'Shabbos, but he can't do that on Shabbos because you can't suck blood from a wound, right? So a person, yes, they bit the side of their cheek, they had some blood in their mouth, whatever reason. Shabbos, they could, during the week, they could suck it and swallow it. But on Shabbos, you can't suck blood from the wound, making the wound bleed. So you have to spit it out. The common simon pay sif nundalid, as we will say in chapter 80 when we get there.
What about Yontif?
Yontov. Yeah, I don't think Yontov is going to be a problem because you can make the wound on Yontov. You're allowed to shecht even. Yeah, it's just a Shabbos problem. 4. Sometimes you find blood in the milk. Now, very rarely today. Because where does it come from? It comes from the udders along with the milk. And here you have to ask a rabbi. The question is going to be if it's going to be nullified in the amount, but it's very rare today. I mean, they have the animals have to have certain health standards. It's very rare. I don't think I ever found blood in any milk that I bought commercially. Did anyone ever have that? No, like reddy streaks in the blood. I don't think so. I don't think. Okay. So 5. Since we're speaking about milk, we're going to go a step further. Mixtures of meat and milk. You're not allowed to eat it. You can't cook it, and you can't have hana. You can't derive any benefit from it. So it's 3 separate things. Now, if we talk about general non-kosher, so let's just say, elephant meat. All right. So elephant meat. Not that there's probably a lot of it around where most of us live, but certain place in the world. So elephant meat, although we're not allowed to eat it because it's not a kosher animal, you could sell it. You could do business with it. You can have benefit from it. You could feed it to a pet dog. I guess if you have elephant meat, you can feed it to a pet lion, right? Because then it's you're having benefit from it. You could cook it for a non-Jew or for whatever other reason. It's no problem to cook it. It's no problem to have benefit from it. The only thing is you can't eat it. Milk and meat is separate though, different though. Milk and meat is forbidden not only to eat it, but also to even cook it and to even have any benefit from it.
Excuse me
There's
for a
only a
second,
few. Yeah,
Rabbi.
sorry. Yeah.
The question that I have for you is, you say that we can cook it, but if we're kosher, then we need a complete set of different pots, pans, and other utensils so we can cook it to give it to whoever we're going to give it to that's non-kosher. Correct?
That's a very good point. So you couldn't cook it at home, as you said, because then your kitchen wouldn't be kosher anymore. So that is correct. Good point. I probably should have made that more clear. But let's say a person worked in a restaurant. He worked in a restaurant that specializes in elephant meat. There's no problems. So he could do that. But he can't work in a restaurant. Well, maybe he could wash the dishes there, but he couldn't cook the cheeseburgers if they have, if that's what they're making. So, yeah, good point. So there's only a few other things that we can't even have benefit from. There's something, let's say it was an idol. Let's say people worship the mango, just as an example. So perfectly kosher fruit, but now got worshipped as a idol, as avodah zarah, as an idol. So it was idol worship. So now you can't. That mango becomes forbidden to have any benefit from. Also, chometz on Pesach, right? Leavened foods on Pesach, same thing. So we can't have any. We can't eat it. We can't cook it. We can't have benefit from it. But and therefore, im nesa ezed dava mataruas bas is something became prohibited because of the mixture of milk and meat, for whatever reason. You have to ask your rabbi what he meant to do with it. Because sometimes it's even going to become prohibited for benefits. You couldn't even feed it to a stray dog. You couldn't even do anything with it. And sometimes it's not. So it really depends. I don't want to get too much into detail now. One of the things of Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, of this bridge code of Jewish law, is that's exactly what it is. It's a bridge. It's a summary. It's a kitzur. So on this, in the large Shulchan Aruch, we'll have a whole chapter with various commentaries. But cut a long story short, we have something that's a milk and meat mixture, and it violating the Torah law. And then we have situations where we're stricter rabbinically, and rabbinically again means actually from biblical times, but it was instituted by the prophets. So when it's a milk and meat mixture rabbinically, it's permitted for benefit. But if it's a Torah law, so let's take a cheeseburger. So a cheeseburger, so it has to actually be cooked together. So a cheeseburger that they put the cheese on the burger when it was still really hot, came right off the grill. So the cheese melts into the burger. That's going to be a Torah issue. And you can't do that. You can't cook it. You can't sell it. You can't earn your livelihood working in a restaurant that does that. You can't do anything like that. Can't have any benefit. But let's say they had I don't know, a cold sandwich. They had I don't know, roast beef and cheese, and it's all cold. So we're not allowed to eat that, but it's not actually cooking. So you could theoretically sell it. So if that was the only place a person could find a job, I mean, I wouldn't recommend people working in non-kosher restaurants in general, but someone that didn't have an opportunity to have another job, and then possibly they could, you could do that. So that's an example. Okay, number 6. So what we're going to do is discuss different things.
Rabbi,
yes.
Number 5, what about, it's not unusual for dog food to have other ingredients besides meat, and some of it may be dairy.
Okay. So if that's the case, it's also a problem. That's right. You can't even feed it to you. You certainly can't feed it to your dog, because you're having benefit from it. But you couldn't even feed it to a stray dog. Like let's say you by mistake made something, so you can't keep it. So you can't feed the stray dog. Can't even do that, because that's also having benefit. Person feels good that they've sustained this animal that was starving, that was this stray animal. So that's a very good point. So if animal foods come like that's problematic. We have to be very careful about it. Yeah, thank you for raising that. So what we're going to discuss in number 6 is that people that you're friendly with, to the point that you might take something off each other's plate. We're going to have to be careful if we're having different foods. Let's say, for example, 2 family members. So 2 family members, if one's eating ice cream, dairy ice cream, and the other one's, let's say, having a roast beef sandwich. So they can't eat straight on the same table. We're going to see what they need to do. They have to have some type of hecker, like a safeguard, something to remind them that they can't take from each other's plate. Because you can imagine he's going to dunk his fork into the ice cream, something, a meat utensil into the dairy ice cream, create problems. So number 6, Shnei Yisraelim Amkirim Zeh Zeh, 2 Jews who know each other. Even if they're normally particular, they're makpid in each other, they wouldn't eat from each other's plate. Right? So let's say you have a good friend. You usually don't eat from each other's plate, even though you are pretty friendly. Nevertheless, they can't eat at the same table, one meat and one milk. Until they do the following. Shiyasu Ezeheker. They make some type of reminder. They put something distinctive to remind them that they have to avoid each other's food. Good going, for example. Each one eats on their own tablecloth or their own placemat. Right? So you might have in a house certain dairy placemats, certain placemats used for meat. So it's a certain different placemat. Or different tablecloths. So one's got a tablecloth on one side of the table, one's got the meat tablecloth on the other side of the table. So that's one way to do it. So then you're going to be reminded, oh, I can't take him. He's got the other tablecloth. Or you put on the table between the foods something that's not normally found there. So you put some type of candelabra if it's not normally kept there, or some other type of utensil. You put the fruit bowl. The fruit bowl is normally on the counter. You put the fruit bowl in between, and it's a reminder. We have this separation. It's like a mechitza, so to speak, in between. So that's another way. So that's point number 1. They can only share the same table if there's some type of distinctive reminder, so they won't eat from each other's plates. The other thing they need to be aware of is they shouldn't drink from the same vessel, because some of the food can stick to the vessel. Now today, in general, most people don't drink from each other's cups and different things, but again, it's people traveling used to sometimes share a water flask or something. So they just need to be aware of that. Okay.
Rabbi,
Sorry. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I saw this, that when Avraham Avinu was serving the angels, and it says that he served them meat and dairy, was either milk or butter, and it says that he stood over them, and some of the commentaries say that he stood over them to make sure that they didn't mix the meat with the milk.
Yeah, most likely, I mean, if you look at the order, first he brought them bread with butter, and that's what without eating. Well, the meat took time. They had to shecht it, they had to salt it, they had to skin it, whatever they had to do to cook it. So problems together. Yeah, I mean, you could explain it that it goes together.
I think they use the word
yeah.
that he stood over them.
Yeah. So that is one way to explain what happened there. But not necessarily were they there at the same time. It's not clear. It's an ambiguous passage. Oh, there's people in the hope they went there long. Okay, there's just 2 people coming from the waiting room, so we'll just wait one moment. We'll announce what we're up to, and then they'll. Okay, so those who just joined us, welcome. Chapter 46. Chapter 46, number 7. So we're discussing that we need to have some type of separation between 2 people. One's eating meat dish, one's having a dairy dish. So for kol shekain, so how much more so? Be careful. Mikika achas im basa v'im cholov. They don't eat from the same piece of bread, right? Because what's going to happen if you're using the same bread at a dairy mill and at a meat mill, you're going to be touching it with your fingers. And if you're using a knife and fork, there can be some food stuck to your fingers, etc. So you're going to end up getting some of the schmaltz from your meat onto the bread, and then he's going to spread his butter on it and have a cheese sandwich. So God forbid. So it's a problematic. Similarly, we have a custom to have separate salt shakers, right, or salt dishes. Technically, I guess you don't have to. The person's very careful that he doesn't get them dirty. He keeps the salt separate. But the custom is to have separate, one for meat, one for milk, to avoid bits getting mixed in. One to use for meat foods, and the other one for dairy foods. Because sometimes you dip the food into the salt. And there's going to be some remnants of the food in the salt, and that'll become a problem. Okay, number 8. There's a custom that you should put some type of identifying mark on the knife that's designated for dairy. The same kali cholovs, so too with any other dairy utensil. Anything that's designated for dairy use should have some type of identifying feature. So they shouldn't get interchanged. Now today it's a little bit easier. Used to be in the past, knives and forks and various things are all sort of handmade, and everyone looked a little bit different, but they weren't too different. So it's easy to get mixed up. Today, normally we buy, they've got some type of design in the hand, and whatever you get in the same set all look alike. So it's easier to say, oh, this is my meat set, and then a different design, this is my dairy set. But let's say like your not the actual knife fork you eat with, the kitchen knives. So they can all look pretty similar. So we need to make some type of mark. Some people put a little bit of paint or nail polish. They put something on it. There is a company actually that you buy it, and it's got a blue one that says dairy and a green one that says parv and a red one that says meat. And you actually buy them all. I think they actually even titled already. The company, so works out pretty well. But we should put some type of sign if they look the same. So and again, let's say our pots. So if the pots are identifiably different, they're just different style of pot, then that's also good. But if they're similar, we need to put some type of identifying mark if they don't have an identifying feature. Okay. So that's the utensils. Achol basa. If a person ate meat, or even not actual meat, but a meat dish. So in this case, what it means is it's got some type of like gravy or schmaltz or something mixed in. So you might be eating vegetables, but it's got some type of meat juice in it. So it's not actual meat, but still that's considered meat. He needs to wait 6 hours until he has dairy. Now, this is not only eating, but one who chews up food for a baby. Right? Sounds a little gross, but before you you were able to buy baby food or have a little machine, food processor that made baby food. People used to pre-chew it for the kids. So even someone only pre-chews, they chew up for the baby food, even though they didn't swallow the food, but they've chewed it. They also have to wait. So a person has to wait if they swallowed it without chewing, or if they chewed it without swallowing. Both of them. That's considered an issue. Now, even if a person waited the time, they waited the shear, the 6 hours. If they find they have meat between the teeth, they have to remove it. But you don't have to wait any longer. It wasn't like after 5 hours they flossed or something and they go, whoops, I had meat there. They don't have to wait 6 more hours. So what does he do? He does 2 types of cleaning of his mouth. One's called kanuach, one's called diach. So what he does is he drinks something that sort of rinses his mouth, and he eats something, let's say like bread or an apple or something like that rubs his, it's wipes out his mouth, so to speak. So what does he do? Dahaino. Shiachol ma'at pas v'kach boy piv. He eats some bread, and then he wipes out his mouth. He also rinses with water, or bisham mashko, some other beverage. So we do similar things. Let's say, for example, as we'll discuss further, that we don't eat fish and meat together. It's not a kashrus issue; it's a health issue. So we don't have to wait, but we can't have it together. So after someone has fish, let's say the Shabbos meal, you have gefilte fish, and the person should drink something and eat some challah, and that rinses and wipes out his mouth. And then you can have the meat, and it's not going to get mixed up. So here, not only does the person need to wait, but ideally, that's if it was something between the teeth, then they should rinse and wipe their mouth. If it's not there's not anything between the teeth, it's not a problem. Okay. So that's if you ate meat. Number 10. If the food that he ate didn't have any actual meat or meat gravy, so what's the issue? But it was cooked in a meat pot. Even though the pot hadn't been meticulously cleaned, you can eat dairy immediately after eating the food. So I'll just clarify this a little bit. When we say even wasn't, really cleaned well, we're not talking about there's chunks of it stuck to the side, right? If there's actual, let's say a person made, I don't know, meatloaf in the dish, and there's little bits of it stuck to the side. So that's not called not cleaned well. That's called there's meat in it, right? So that's not what we're talking about. What we mean is that, it wasn't scrubbed, that there's perhaps not the slightest dot of something, or so if someone just uses a meat pot, let's presume it was clean. Let's say, for example, they took a meat pot and they had pasta in the meat pot. So you can't eat that with the dairy. Right? You can't put cheese on that, but you couldn't have cheese right afterwards. Okay. Number 11. Achol gavina. Someone ate gavina in this context means soft cheese. It's like a cottage cheese or a cream cheese, soft cheese. Now, technically, mutar lechol achra bos miyad. A person could eat meat immediately afterwards with a few conditions. Condition number 1, besuda cheres, has to be a different meal. So you have to say after blessing and start a new meal. Uvad shibat yadav, you have to check your hands or clean your hands, make sure there's no residue on your hands. And im ein shum dava magvina, which makes sure there's no cheese or something stuck to your hands, or you chatzim b'mayim, or wash them. And you also have to clean your teeth and rinse your mouth before having the meat. So, from a technically halachic perspective, someone had soft cheese or a drink of milk. If they clean out their mouth and they make sure around their mouth and their hands are clean, they don't have to wait. Generally, the custom, though, is to wait. And this is Kabbalistically, not halachically, to avoid having milk and meat within an hour of each other, either way. Right? It's actually it's from the Rime and Hamna, but it's a Kabbalah Sefer. But in the Shulchan Aruch, the big Shulchan Aruch itself, so in the pretty much all the editions, you have Hagois Hagra, the Vilna Gaon's notes on the Shulchan Aruch, and so he quotes so the Zohar Rime and Hamna quotes from there that if someone has milk and meat, irrespective of the order, but within an hour of each other, it creates some type of shindalid. It's not really. Often they translate in English often as a demon, but it's certainly not what the Western world calls demons. It's there's no such thing as what the Christian concept, but it's some type of spiritual entity, and it follows a person around for up to a month, and it can damage them. So it creates a negative spiritual energy. So therefore, even though from a technical halachic perspective, a person could have a glass of milk and just wash out their mouth and then have meat, many people wait. So some people wait drop over half an hour, because that way the majority of the time is sometimes like the whole thing. So 31 minutes. And some people wait the full hour. And that's the custom in Chabad amongst others. And I highly recommend it, even though, as we said, from a technically halachic perspective, it's not necessarily a requirement. But that's if it's a soft cheese. So we're talking about someone drank milk, and soft cheese means like a cottage cheese or a cream cheese. Vim haya kasha. But if it was hard cheese, so here we're giving two categories. We're saying soft cheese and hard cheese. Today we really have three categories. The hard cheese that it's going to speak about now is cheese that was aged for 6 months. Now, most cheeses, they still are around aged cheeses, but most cheeses are not aged that long. Let's say, for an example, a cheddar cheese. So in times past, it was aged quite a long time, 6 months. Today, they add chemicals to it to make it go faster. So it's probably on like 2 months. Now, many of the kosher companies, they put as an expiry date on their cheeses 6 months from the production. Now, that it's actually not expiry date. It might keep for another year after that sometimes, depending what type of cheese it is. But they put that date because after that, it becomes, according to one opinion, even though it's still not aging anymore, according to one opinion, comes a 6-month cheese. You don't need to be strict about that, but we'll get to that in a moment. So we have soft cheeses. The soft cheese is cream cheese, cottage cheese. So from a technical halachic perspective, you could rinse out your mouth and have meat straight away. Then we'll have what we call middle cheeses. That's today's cheddar, mozzarella, Monster, these commercial cheeses, the American cheese. So they no longer age 6 months. Today, it takes a month or two with the benefit of chemicals. Those you really probably even halachically have to wait an hour. Then we have, and it doesn't mention those here because they didn't have those chemicals or didn't use them in those days. But hard cheese, so either you get what we call real hard cheese, let's say Parmesan cheese. Some of the fancier cheeses are still made in an old-fashioned way, and they're really aged. They are aged. It's I don't want to sound uncultured, but I always say cheese with varicose veins that smells like my sneakers doesn't excite me. But some people really like all those so-called fancy cheeses, and they're probably aged 6 months. So those ones, vim hayekavina kasha, if it was a hard cheese, the haino. So what's the definition? She'umda bekeva vishna shisha chodoshim. It was set with the stomach. Well, doesn't have to be set with that, but it was aged for 6 months. Oi shehi mesolas, or it's wormy. Now, not that it has worms in it now because you can't eat worms, but some types of cheeses, like the original Swiss cheese, right, with the worms, they used to let it sit and had worms in it, and that's what made the holes. Today they use a drill, use machines, right? Personally, I'm not excited to have cheese that a worm ate through it, but some people find that very cultured. So that type of hard cheese, if you want to eat meat afterwards, so you also have to wait 6 hours. So you have to wait 6 hours after a hard cheese. There is an exception. The exception is if it melted. So you have to make sure it actually melted. So sometimes, let's say a person put a Parmesan cheese on a very hot pasta, and it melts it. So then it also becomes, once it melted, it becomes softer, and you also have to wait an hour. But you have to make sure that has to be that it really melted, not that just put it on and a few pieces melted and then. Okay. So just to summarize that, 3 levels of cheese. One is soft cheese or just milk. From halakha perspective, you could just rinse out your mouth and eat meat straight away. Generally speaking, the customers to wait an hour, and I can't tell you that you have to do that, but I highly recommend it. It's my suggestion, or at least half an hour. Then there's the medium level of cheeses. They're the hard cheeses, but they become hard with the help of chemicals, like most commercial cheddar, mozzarellas, etc. Those you have to wait an hour afterwards. And then there's aged cheese, that it's really aged for 6 months, and like a Parmesan or some of the other cheeses, and those halachically you have to wait 6 hours afterwards before you can have meat. All right. So number 12. Misha, yeah. Okay, unmute.
Yeah, usually non-kosher cheeses have animal tenant, is it in?
Yeah, a lot of them can. So
Right.
we
If there's a cheese that says no animal, which I know of, tenant in it, does that mean that it's kosher or?
no. So be kosher cheese, there's several factors. It's an excellent question. There's several factors. So number one is, let's just talk about commercial food in general, right? Before we get to cheese specifically. Commercial food in general have a lot of things in them that are not considered an ingredient. So I'll just give an example. A friend of mine, I think I mentioned this once, but a friend of mine was asked to give a kosher supervision for a chocolate with a candy center to be kosher for Passover, kosher for Pesach. So he gets to list the ingredients. The ingredients, all no problems. Okay, one thing they have to change the brand, but all no problems. But of course, being responsible, you don't just go by the ingredients. You have to go to the factory and check out the actual process. And so the center drops out of a tube onto a conveyor belt, and it got sprayed. It was hot. It got sprayed with a powder, and then it got dunked in the chocolate. So we asked them, what's the powder? They said it's flour. So this was a hot, gooey thing with the flour. This is actual real chametz. So he says, how come you didn't put that in the ingredients? They said it's not an ingredient. It's just to hold its form till it gets covered in the chocolate. So I just use this as an example. Now, I mean, they weren't trying to cheat. They were very open. They let him come and look. It just didn't occur to them because they think in different ways. So the fact that something has an ingredient or a something or doesn't contain an ingredient, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. So that's just in general. Before we get to cheese, that's all foods. So you really can't go by ingredients. As well as that, certain things, if it's less than a certain percentage, you also don't have to put it in. And it doesn't mean that necessarily some things would, but some things won't become nullified halachically. So that's another issue by going with ingredients. So that's number one. Number two is, besides the actual kashrus, we have a rabbinic decree that was actually brought in the time of the Greek occupation pre-Hanukkah, that we can't eat cheese that was produced by non-Jews without supervision. And the concern is, now technically only kosher milk can make cheese. Meaning if you take other animals, pig, dog, whatever it is, the milk does not produce cheese. Just physically can't happen. Right? This was why they used to always add pig milk to the cow milk, because since it didn't start to become chunky, like cheesy, when it got older, it was like a preservative, pre-refrigeration preservative. So it was a standard thing to add pig milk to the cow's milk. So even though the pig milk can't make cheese, there's concern it's going to be mixed in a small amount. If there's a small amount mixed in, so then it would still make the cheese. You wouldn't know. So therefore, there's a rabbinic decree that we can't have cheese that was produced by a non-Jew without supervision. So that's the next point. That's even if it didn't contain any kosher things. The other thing is, even when they don't use an animal rennet, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a kosher rennet. It could be that it is. It makes it much more likely, but it's not necessarily either. And sometimes what they call, so sometimes they take something and they make it in a laboratory, but they make it out of the original thing. So after they've had 3-4 steps, they don't call it animal based anymore. But for us, halachically, it could be. It's like the lab meat, right? So they're taking a cell, one cell, they're making many cells, but it's problematic because they took it from a living animal, so it's eva min achai. It's a prohibition of having meat from a living animal, and even though it's many steps, they produced the one from the other, from the other, from the other. It's a halachic problem. So I know it's a very long way to say no, it's not good, but I'm just trying to explain to you, just trying to give you the background information of what the problems could be.
Rabbi?
Well, I just let him finish his question. I'll come to you. Yeah, did I answer your question?
What about
Yeah.
goat's milk? That makes cheese.
Yeah, well, goat's kosher.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of my sons, he has a farm, Anapoli Farms. He produces goat's milk and goat's cheese. So it might make it to your town soon. You'll see these Anapoli Farms. Fine. Yes. All right. So Bruce, yeah.
Question I have for you is, what about grated cheese? Not shredded, grated cheese.
So grated, it's going to depend what cheese it was grated from. So let's say it was today's standard commercial mozzarella. So it's not aged 6 months. It's usually 1 month with some chemicals. So the fact that it's grated as is would be, yeah. And if it melts, that would be to wait 1 hour.
What about Parmesan cheese?
So Parmesan cheese, as we said, is 6 hours because even the commercial ones are aged 6 months. But if it's melted, so if it's grated or shredded, that'll help it melt easier. That's normally how they normally shredded. I mean, it's a real like almost like a flour type thing. Grated is probably so. If having it shredded still 6 hours, unless it melts. So if the shredded got put into a very hot pasta, maybe even over the fire was put in, then it's going to melt. Then you would only have to wait 1 hour.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Rabbi Werner,
Yeah.
in I think it was in the early 60s, the Congress passed a law that anything that is less than 2% of the total volume of the product doesn't have to be listed as an ingredient.
Yeah. So I'm not sure the exact percentage, and it could be for different things. It's different amount, but yeah, that's what I said.
It's 2% on everything.
2%. Okay. So
anything that's 2% or more has to be listed.
yeah, and so some things halakhically with that minute amount will be nullified, but some things won't.
Right.
Yeah, and that's an issue. And I'll just to give another example. I gave hashgacha to a sourdough bakery in Australia many years ago. But we didn't really make money out of it. It was just so we had something to eat. There was no kosher bakery, right? So it was these guys that were vegan, and it was very natural. And we had to make a few changes for us, and we used to go. Actually, my wife used to go and turn on the ovens 3 times a week, and it was excellent bread. They then brought in a new partner after about 2 years, and he wanted to try new things. And so one of the things they wanted to make like pastries. And so one of the things he brought in, he had this,
Rabbi,
he had this,
please.
So he had this, they found this chocolate, dairy-free chocolate. And it said dairy-free. There was no dairy in the ingredients. Advertised itself on the label as being dairy-free. But when he showed it to me, and they said, look, it's even kosher it's under kosher supervision. And so I looked at it. Yeah, it was under supervision. It said OUD. Now, recently, meaning after that, sometimes now when it's OUD, it's made in dairy equipment. Because they feel that commercially a lot of things are not properly cleaned. So even though it's dairy equipment, so it could technically be parav or they used to make a distinction between dairy equipment and OUD. So now they just pretty much say everything's OUD. This is before they started doing that. All right. So that was so it was actually considered dairy. So I told the fellow, this is dairy. He says, cow, what's in it? So I told him, look, I don't know. I never went to the factory. I don't know how they make it. But the rabbi who does go to the factory, he's certified it as dairy. So there's obviously something in it. And anyway, the new partner wasn't as cooperative with us, and at a certain point we had to part ways, unfortunately. But this was just an example. So again, I don't know what they put in it. I never went to that factory, different things, but someone who went in there, even though they could legally call it dairy-free on the packaging, they legally did not have anything dairy in the ingredients, but it was in such a way that it was not nullified. I mean, dairy could, I won't say always is, but usually is nullified 1 in 60. So less than 2% would be more than 1 in 60. but whatever it was not nullified over here. And even though they certified it kosher, they certified it kosher dairy. So without, like I said, I can't go into specifics because I don't know how they made it.
Rabbi,
But this is an example. Yeah.
there are some non-dairy kosher that might say even it's made within a dairy environment, and where there's nuts and other things that are
Yeah.
processed.
So a lot of those things don't necessarily mean anything. It could. It's a red flag, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean anything, because when they say that it's made in a facility, that's really because they don't want to get sued. So it could be it's made on the next production line. It doesn't really come, but they just want to make sure that they're free from any liability. So if you had a good hechsher, unfortunately, not every hechsher is a good one, which is disappointing. There's some people who don't really check properly, or either they have good standards but they don't follow through properly, or they don't have good standards. There's two types of not such great ones. If you have a reliable hechsher who says that it's parav or it's whatever it is, and you see something like that, you don't have to be concerned. The good hechsher has checked it out. It's there for liability. It's not an issue. But if you are looking into products to see could it become kosher, or could you do a kosher batch, or different things, those kind of things, when I say it's a red flag, I mean, it doesn't mean this is a problem, but it's something you have to look into. Why do they feel the need to say that? And if you see it's just a liability issue, it's not really affecting this product, there's not a problem. But it does show you that you better have a look at it. Yeah, David.
I once heard a lecture by a kosher supervisor. He was telling us all the different problems he had seen. And he said he saw this one product and some of the ingredients were questionable and it had this rabbi's name on the product. So he spoke to the rabbi. He said to the rabbi, "How can you be certifying this in this particular product? It's got some of these kosher ingredients which are very questionable." He says, "I didn't certify it." He says, "I see your name on the product." He says, "No, it says packaged under the supervision. I only supervise the packaging."
Oh, that's a relief. Yeah, in fairness, sometimes it does happen. I'll give you an example. What I mean. So my son-in-law brings meat into Phoenix, kosher meat. So he brings by the pallets. He brings big cases, but most customers don't want to buy a case, so he packages it into smaller. He'll cut it and put into smaller pieces. So the local Vadakashus here supervises is repackaging. Right. In other words, when he says that this meat is really from this extra and different things, that's what he says. But they don't. I mean, I'm sure they wouldn't let him do that with meat that came from a hechsher that they wouldn't approve of, right? And he wouldn't have those things in stock anyway. But in concept, they only supervise the packaging, not the original product. So there is such a thing, depending on what it is. Just what it so could be, but yes, but you wouldn't think that you would supervise the packaging if you weren't comfortable with the initial product.
I think they were
That's
kosher.
that's right.
Kosher
You know,
candies.
sorry.
I think they were kosher candies. But this rabbi was saying, "Oh, I didn't supervise the production, the ingredients, and I didn't do any of that. I just packaged. I just watched them package it, and I think it was
Yeah.
even marked as kosher for Pesach. So
Oh,
he only supervised the packaging."
right. But I'll just say, a good, really, I mean, the larger the hechsher, the less feasible this becomes. But in Melbourne there was I mean, hechsher still exists, but the rabbi's passed away. It's someone else. Doesn't have this. Was Rabbi Beck, Oliver Schoen. Incredible Talmid Chacham, incredible Torah scholar. It's very holy Jew. But his community gave Heksher. As a side point, although they did approve, like they would approve certain commercial products that were made in whatever factory, but to actually, so it was approved product, but to actually be under their officially that they could put on their packaging that was under the supervision of this congregation, the person had to be a religious Jew. But the rabbi himself would go and work as a mashgiach every now and then in every place to see how they do it. And I'll give an example. There was an ice cream company. And so he went there one day. I mean, only might have been one day a year that he went and worked there, but he worked there for the day. And he was washing the blueberries. And the person in charge says, no, don't wash the blueberries like that. It takes too long. Wash them like this. So he says, no, I'm going to need you to wash them like this. She says, well, but then it's not viable. Comes, it slows everything down. It's going to be too expensive. So he canceled blueberry flavor on the spot. Finished. And how would you find something like that? Only by being there yourself. So either you have to be there yourself, or you have to have a team. So one of the things is the OU, for an example. I mean, sometimes in certain things they might not necessarily have the highest standard, but generally the mashgichim are trained. They all have the same, whatever standard it is. They all do this. They have the same. So it's a problem. You can have sometimes places that have very high standards in theory, but they're not actually being implemented. So that's how it goes. So let's squeeze in number 12. Mish achal gevina roitzelachol basa. He ate cheese, right? He had dairy. And now he wants to eat meat. So let's presume that either he's washed out his mouth because it was a soft cheese, or he's waited the time that he is, whatever happens to be. What does he have to do? He has to remove any remnants, any leftover bread that he ate with the cheese. Because, he touched it with his hands, or whatever he did, even cut a slice, it's a problem. Likewise, he can't use the same tablecloth. So either, it's best to have different tablecloths, or a tablecloth for one and the table for the other. But I guess if you had the so material tablecloths, like the traditional sort of tablecloths, that's always going to be a problem. If you have like these plastic ones, I guess technically you could clean it, but you're setting yourself up for a mistake by using the same tablecloths. So better have different tablecloths. And also the other way, you can't eat, just like you can't eat cheese on a dairy one, you can't eat dairy on a cheese one, on a meat one. Likewise, you can't use a meat knife to cut bread for cheese, or vice versa. So you have to either have a par of dairy knife, a par of bread knife. You have to have a neutral bread knife, or you have to have a meat one and a dairy one. But filo imasakim noki. Now, even if the knife was clean, it doesn't help. That's in the first instance. In a time of need, let's say, for example, a person is traveling and they only have one knife. Then, if he cleans the knife really, really well and he checks it and it's spotless, then he could cut the bread and then use that bread for dairy. With cheese, or the other way around. All right, any questions before we finish up? Okay, well, it's good to be back with everyone after a little break.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
Your first line on number 12 says a person who wants to eat meat after it says Gavina cheese.
Yeah.
Because mine I have the English only. It says with dairy. It doesn't have cheese in there at all. Maybe it says a person who wants to eat meat eating dairy. So they mistranslated the Gavina in here.
Yeah, or maybe yeah, I guess so. I mean, but it means it would be dairy in general, be the same thing. So if they tried to be a little more liberal.
What's the word for dairy is chalabi?
Yeah, I guess so. But it's rarely used in like in Shulchan Aruch. It's more of a modern word.
All right, Rabbi, thank you very much.
Pleasure. We'll see everyone next week, God willing.
You, Rabbi.
Take care.